Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Let's start as usual with our meditation for 5 minutes, setting a positive motivation, and then spending some time calming our minds, turning inward, starting to become, settled and focused on our own minds. So be sure you check your posture before you start, and then guide yourself through taking some deep breaths, setting a motivation, focusing on the breath. Okay, so let's get started. So to do a little review from yesterday we talked about selflessness. We went through that again. And then we talked about this self-compassion. So the fact that for many of us modern people, that we have in our lives, probably at some point in our lives, gone through a period in which we felt unworthy or somehow undeserving or bad, or a failure, and sometimes these beliefs about ourselves can get in the way of being, becoming who we really can become, achieving our greatest potential. And so self-compassion talks about how we can start to treat ourselves with respect and treat ourselves with kindness, even when we're going through a difficult time. And especially when we're going through a difficult time, that this is actually the time when we want to be more kind to ourselves. And that it's through being kind to ourselves that we can actually express kindness toward others. So looking at ourselves as being the instrument of love, the instrument of compassion, the instrument of wisdom in the world, for those in our immediate circumstances and for those around us. And in order to do that, we have to be functioning really well. We have to be, have a certain level of taking care of ourselves. And that problems come when we think that when we think that by helping others, by not being selfish, that we give too much away. Okay, we give too much time or we give too much energy, and then as a result we end up suffering. We end up getting sick, or too tired, or making mistakes, and undermining our ability to actually benefit others. And then as a result we get down on ourselves. We're unkind to ourselves. And so when we talk about self-compassion, the definition here, I'll show you, is when we suffer caring for ourselves as we would care for someone we truly love. So if you think about a situation where say your friend just lost their job, or just broke up in a relationship, and they come over to your house or they call you up, and they're really upset, and they're hurting, and how do you treat them? What do you say to them? Do you tell them, oh, get over it, you need to get back, they were a jerk anyway, just get on with your life, or it's your own fault, or something like that? We wouldn't actually say those kinds of things to someone who we care about. We would support them, and we would, take care of them, and, give them a cup of tea and listen to them. And yet when those things happen to us, when we go through really difficult situations, we tend to think that we have to be mean to ourselves, to start again, to try again, and that somehow we blame ourselves for the bad things that happen to us. And so learning to be kind to ourselves actually helps us to be kind to others. So the parts of it, of self-compassion, have to do with self-kindness. So how do we talk to ourselves? What kinds of things do we say to ourselves? And this really, being mindful, doing calm abiding meditation, when you start to become aware of all the things that are going on in your mind, and what kinds of things you're saying to yourself. And it's not even necessarily phrases, and words. Sometimes it's just a feeling, like I recently, was ready to start this class, and I was feeling a little tired and worried that I wouldn't be able to do a very good job, expressing myself. And so then I had this, it was like this feeling of just like putting, failure, putting myself down, just like this sort of a depression, and I really recognized that. And I was like, well, that's not going to help me, right? That's not going to make me a better teacher. That's just going to make me, give in to whatever is going not well for me. So that, and that's more of a self-judgment. I'm not good enough or something like that, versus understanding. And what they find is actually people who fail, who lose jobs, or fail on tests, or things like this, that actually, if they are kind to themselves, they are much more likely to try again, to continue again, because it's not this horrible, overwhelming experience of failure that then, on top of losing a job or a relationship or making a big mistake, that on top of that, then we get down on ourselves, makes it into this really horrible kind of experience. And the more that we can be kind and understanding, then we're more likely to try again. Okay. And then the other one was common humanity versus isolation, recognizing that everybody makes mistakes and everybody goes through difficult times, and everybody has suffering in their lives, and you aren't alone. You just aren't alone. And one of the practices of compassion is, what we can do is we can take this suffering and we can transform this suffering into an experience of compassion, in the sense that when we're going through a difficult time, like right now, many of us are stuck, in our homes, and can't go out, and can't, maybe can't see our loved ones, our friends, or we had plans for what we were going to do, and now all of that has been, we have no idea. It's like, what's going to happen, when we're going to be able to resume our normal life. All these things are going on, and yet so many people are feeling the same way. And so through recognizing our own suffering, we can transform that into having compassion for everyone who is also feeling this. So we start to widen that heart, we start to open our hearts. And then the last one is this mindfulness versus over identification. So when we're in really, feeling very vulnerable, overwhelmed with feelings of hopelessness, or feelings of confusion, or depression, or anger, instead of giving into it, because when we do this cognitive fusion of thinking that we are our negative emotions, then to get rid of them, we think we have to get rid of ourselves. So then we do this, we escape, right? We run away from our feelings. So we become workaholics, or we abuse substances, or we binge on television or something like that, to somehow get away from us. Okay. And actually what happens is that we get away for a little while, but then we come back to it, and it's all there again. And actually, mindfulness, being present with these difficult feelings, for some part of the time, to just be present and feel in our bodies what it feels like, to be hopeless, and what does it feel like to be confused, and where is that sense of uncertainty, and where is that fear, and allowing ourselves to be present with it, to be aware and present with those feelings, then allows them to move through us. It actually allows them to start to shift. When we ignore them and push them away, oftentimes they come back with extra energy. But when we can be present with them and just recognize, oh, this is what's going on. Oh, I'm feeling, overwhelmed by this, or I'm feeling upset, that this thing happened. And when we can recognize that, then we have much more freedom to move through it, to make different decisions, to respond well to it. And it creates this vertical space, like Mingyur Rinpoche talks about. You have the emotion over here, and then you have your sense of the observer, the calm, the watcher, the stillness, this aspect of your mind that is watching whatever those sensations are and those thoughts are. And then it's easier to make better decisions about things. And also they change. We can see their impermanence. We can start to see lots of options. When we're stuck, and overwhelmed and over identifying with the emotion, it's a lot harder to see possibilities, because there are always, it's never just one or the other. It's never just black or white. There's always shades of gray in any decision. And so finding, you know, novel solutions, you know, they say thinking outside of the box is sometimes the phrase that is used, is actually easier when we're in this mindful state, when we are present with whatever is arising, and have this sense of separation from it, that we aren't it, you know, we aren't stuck in it. Okay, so then this allows us to then also develop this aspiration of bodhicitta. So this bodhicitta aspiration is this wish that all beings be free from suffering. So it starts to recognize the fact that we are interconnected with all beings. We are not as separate and individual and alone as we believe. And as we view ourselves, that was the exercise that we did on selflessness, was starting to get free of that sense of a self as concrete, independent, unchanging, permanent, and starting to see that we are many things. And you can do that with yourself. I mean, you can write a list of how you are. You know, for me, it would be, well, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a nun, I'm a teacher, I'm a friend, I'm a scholar, I'm a meditator, I'm a knitter, you know, I'm, you know, right there is like 9 different things. And which one is the real me? Can you say one of them is a me? You can't really. You can't say one of those is me. So then how many me's are there? Right? There's really only one me, but I'm all these things, right? And then when we start talking about the interconnections, in order for us to exist, we have to, there's all the causes and conditions that went into the who we are right now are also a part of us. And so those connections, all the supports we've ever received, also are part of how we exist. And so then the me is not so separate and not so alone. Okay. So then developing bodhicitta means, how can I, you know, take all these circumstances to the best of my ability, continue to grow, continue to change, so that I can find a way to release my suffering, to be happier in my life, and then I can lead others. I can show others of the way. Okay, usually more through role modeling, not necessarily directly, you know, telling them, oh, you need to behave this way or you need to behave this way, because of course we have different minds, so everybody's path is going to be different. But it's the more, and how did you learn? You have to, how did you learn to be kind? Right? How did you learn to be compassionate? It was usually because someone was kind to you, or someone was unkind to you, and you decided you didn't want to be that way. Okay? So it was, that's how we learn, you know. So we can be that for others, not the unkind one unless they really need it, but the kind one, right? And then others learn, you know, we watch others, we see others, you know, putting other people first, and then we want to do it. In Buddhism, this is especially Tibetan Buddhism, there's a very strong, they call it guru devotion, but this relationship with the teacher. So a teacher is someone who is further along on the path than you are, someone who has made some headway in getting rid of their concrete sense of self, and knows how to be kind to others. And so with our teachers, like with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we watch, how does he treat people? You know, how did he react to the suffering in his life? And if anybody has had major suffering in their life, you know, it's the, you know, His Holiness. His Holiness had his kingdom taken away when he was, you know, like in his 20s or something, and 1 million of his people were put to death that he was responsible for. And yet, what does he do? He travels the world teaching peace. You know, he didn't go out and raise an army, and, you know, he doesn't go out and like badmouth the Chinese or anything. He actually acts for dialogue, you know, for trying to find a way to work with the Chinese and see his people served at the same time. And so, you know, we learn this from our teachers, and so we can become that too for others. And that's actually the best way that we can help others, is by becoming, you know, who we are, the best of our abilities, and becoming that instrument of compassion and peace and love and courage and strength and all those kinds of things. So bodhicitta is about this commitment to this, wanting all beings to be happy in the lasting sense of happiness, and knowing that the best way for me to be able to benefit others is if I work on myself. um, and and it doesn't mean that we completely ignore other people's needs. You know, if I can directly help someone, that is a part of me becoming better. You know, if I can be generous in some way, I have the way to be generous. If I have the resources and I have the time, and the energy to be generous toward others, then that actually makes me a more generous person. So it's not like we're stopping it. It's just like we're adding this other label, this other layer of how we interact in the world. It becomes about us, and as much as it becomes about others. And then this, we talked a little bit yesterday about this, you know, this boundary between self and others starts to break down. Okay. What is good for me becomes what is good for others, because it's never only about me, it's also about others. And what is good for others is also good for me, because I find that serving others, that benefiting others, makes me happy, because I could not be happy all by myself. It's impossible, because I don't exist that way. Okay, so then we talked about one of the ways to develop, this bodhicitta motivation is through something called, 7-point cause and effect. So this is a meditation that we do where we start to expand our sense of love and caring to all what we call mother sentient beings. So we open our hearts even further, because for many of us, it's fairly easy for us to love and care for those who are close to us. So our, you know, our parents or our siblings or our children or our close friends, or, you know, some of our other relatives, our partners, spouses, you know, these people tend to be, when we think about loving them, I mean, I know I hear myself saying that and I think, oh yeah, but they're also the ones that can irritate us the most. But in general, it's easier to love someone who we know. And people who we don't know, who we've never met, who have never had anything to do with us, it's a little bit harder to have a relationship with them and see them as wanting to be happy, and then also have a caring for them. So bodhicitta is about expanding our hearts to include all beings. And so seeing all beings as having been one's mother is one way in which we can start to do this. The fact that we have, you know, have had beginningless lives means that we have had mothers many, 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 many times in our lives. And so there are other beings who have been our mother. And then considering the kindness of mothers. You know, what does it take for a mother to raise a child, and all the sacrifices involved, and all the kindnesses that are involved in anyone being our mother, okay, or a main caretaker. It doesn't have to be your mother, but we all needed someone who was nurturing for us, or else we wouldn't be alive right now. Someone had to have taken care of us. And then going further and wishing to repay that kindness. I was reading, a one, well, I'm studying a bit these, I'll talk about those tomorrow, but one of them was gratitude. And gratitude is not only recognizing that, you know, and celebrating how others have been kind to us. Like they had cook our food. You know, I think about my mom and how she, cooked my food, you know, cooked dinner every night for, you know, years. I mean, 18 years or more, you know. And and how they, you know, that's so, we don't have electricity, okay. That kindness you know, amazing, and then wanting to repay it. So when I go home now, I'm like, well, let me cook for you. And this idea that we could extend that. And it doesn't mean, again, that directly we can go out and cook dinner for everybody. Obviously we can't, right? But we can have an open heart that whoever is in front of us, they're all sentient beings, no matter who it is, right? Even if they're doing things that don't make me happy, they're all sentient beings, and I can open my heart to them. I can want them to be happy. I can want them to be free from suffering. Okay. So that way we develop great love, we develop great compassion, meaning compassion and love for all beings. And then this next step is the being willing to take on the responsibility. So we call it the supreme thought of taking responsibility, which is this determination that I am going to be the one who is going to remove their suffering, who is going to free them from all, you know, all their suffering, from samsara. And this becomes a very high aspiration because it's hard. I mean, just imagine, oh, I'm the one who's going to free everybody, right? And that's huge, isn't it? It sounds a little like prideful in some ways, but it isn't meant to be that way. It isn't meant to be saying, I know what's better, you know, I have somehow, I'm better than you, and so I'm going to do it for you, because that's obviously not how it works. But the supreme thought of taking responsibility becomes this aspiration. And when we have really high goals and really high aspirations and really high wishes, then we jump higher, we go higher. Okay. When we only shoot for, oh, I can only do so much, then that's all we do, right? It's when we have an uplifted sense, then we go higher. And then bodhicitta becomes this aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all beings. And because enlightenment is our full potential, and we are much more effective in benefiting others when we are free of negative emotions. The more we contract, the more we shut down, the more we live in fear and anger and depression, the less we are of benefit to everyone. So if you can imagine, if we were completely free of those negative emotions, what we would develop would be this limitless love and this limitless compassion. Okay. So part of that, you know, sort of like a precursor to developing, you know, this bodhicitta motivation is also having a calm mind, okay, in many situations, because we're trying here to be beneficial in every interaction that we have, okay? And so in order to do that, we can't be like pulled by, you know, what people are doing and what people are saying, and you know what we're feeling, and you know, like all these things. Our mind can't be on this constant roller coaster, because if it is, we don't ever experience calmness, and we can't really approach any kind of wisdom. So I'm going to have us do some breakout groups, so discussion groups with all of you. And the question I'd like you to discuss, so let's do 50 groups. Let's see. The question I'd like you to discuss, and then come back, of course, because we'll talk about it, is how do you maintain a balanced and peaceful mind? Okay, whether you're alone or whether you're with others. And of course, this is very important now that we're in this sort of challenging situation. So maybe you guys can share some ideas with each other of how do you maintain a balanced and peaceful mind in the face of these really challenging circumstances. Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm creating the rooms.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there people in your room with you talking? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that's, so I hear the background. But yeah, just unmute yourself when you want to talk. Oh, where are you, Kate?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, awesome. I'm from Chicago originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
And where are you been at?
I'm from Israel.
Are you in
Nice.
Israel now?
Yes.
Ah, because I've been talking to some Israelis, I think this morning, that were in Goa. And you look like you're in Goa, but you're in Israel, huh? You do for the
No,
background.
I'm outside my house, but no, I
Ah.
was in India until a few weeks ago, and then I came back.
Ah, good. It's good you got home. So when I'm in a breakout group, I actually want you guys to talk. But I have to also say that on the recordings that we do, we're being recorded. So just so you know, you're aware that, like, then we post it. So yeah, just so you're aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I could, let me pause the recording. Would you feel better about that?
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Okay, okay. Okay, so welcome back. Yay, isn't that fun? I think that's the greatest. I got to talk to someone back in the US and someone in Israel, and yeah, it's exciting. Okay, I don't even know what time it is. It must be really early in the morning in the US. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so equanimity. So we have two types of equanimity. One of them is the one you just talked about, of having this balanced mind. And it can be really, really helpful when we're trying to work with these difficult emotions and when we're trying to interact with others in a positive way. So no emotional reactivity. So typically, Lama Yeshe called it our yo-yo minds. When things are difficult, we go way down, and get really upset and overwhelmed. And then when things are really good, we get really excited and really happy and really, kind of, overexcited. And then things turn like they always do, and they go down. And then our minds go with it. It goes like this. And instead of recognizing that life is, like Mingyur Rinpoche says, like a stock market, it always goes up and down. Whenever it goes down, it's going to go up again. Whenever it's up, it's going to go down again. And life is like that. And so if we are constantly pulled, by these feelings, or by these situations, then there's very little peace. And also, I think so then we talk about our overall happiness. If we have these episodes of really big depression or really big boredom, or just like if we really go really low, instead of keeping ourselves on more of an even keel, then we tend to have an overall lower level of happiness, because those episodes of negativity or depression can actually bring our overall level of happiness down. So the more balanced we can be, actually, like this, is actually a better way to interact in the world. And it doesn't mean that we don't feel, okay? I think that sometimes we get this view from television, if we watch a lot of dramas, that we get this view that we have to have these powerful emotions in order to be happy. And that's what living is. That living is when we're when we're in love, and then we're worried about losing them, like when our hearts break, and that somehow that drama, we used to call them drama queens, like people who really crave this sense of lots of conflict in their lives. And actually, when you start to have a more balanced mind, you tend to be happier overall, and that's better than doing this up and down kind of thing. So staying calm no matter what happens, and this is really helpful when we're talking about patience and not reacting in an angry way to situations, and our minds aren't pulled from one extreme to the other. Okay, so that's kind of what we talked about just now when we were talking about how to keep a balanced and peaceful mind. And some things that we talked about that maybe would be helpful for you is getting outside and walking. My teacher said this too the last time I saw him. He was talking about, don't just be practicing all the time, but also get out, open your mind, let yourself, relax a little bit, walking in nature if you can. That's really helpful. Okay, so another type of equanimity, this is a quote from Carl Jung. So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist, I believe, and he was a contemporary of Freud. I think he and Freud, he may have been a student of Freud for a little while, but he was definitely at the same time. But he ended up breaking away from Freud, and because he had more of a tendency to want to look at the whole person. So Freud was very focused on sexuality. He was very focused on work, love and work and sexuality. And Jung wanted to include things like spirituality. And for Jung, it was very important that we look at the whole person. And actually, the process of becoming healthy within Jungian psychotherapy has to do with developing parts of ourselves that balance us out. So if we have a tendency to be more introverted, get a lot of energy from being alone, then he encouraged us to explore our extroverted self as well. Or if we often, perceive the world, through our senses in a very sensual way, then he encouraged us to use, more judgment and more, thinking and kind of way. And so this sense of a whole being, and also the male and female aspects, that if we are very much identified with being female, in our gender, if we're female or male, then exploring our other side, well, whether it's, as a male exploring our softness, or as a female exploring our assertiveness, and our strength. And so these kinds of things. And so one of the things that Carl Jung often talked about was this tendency that we have to project onto others our own things that we don't want to own in ourselves. Okay, so everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Okay, so the way this works, this projection thing, is that we may be around someone who really irritates us, who really annoys us, and they aren't necessarily doing anything directly to make us angry, but they for some reason they just get under our skin. Okay, and sometimes what that is related to, and we will often label them enemy in the sense of we don't want to be around them, we reject them, because for whatever reason they annoy us. Okay, sometimes what we have to look at is actually our own, what is it inside of ourselves that we are rejecting, or what part of ourselves are we not accepting and admitting to, that we're putting onto that other person and then pushing them away. Okay, so this happened for me. It's happened a lot for me, but one particular instance that I remember was I had a coworker who had a really strong relationship with our supervisor. And he loved her a lot, like not in an intimate way, but he was very, very good friends with her, and he was always taking care of her, and he was always trying to make her happy. And it really bothered me. And it didn't really affect me because we weren't in competition or anything, and I had a fine relationship with her. But I really saw that he was doing this kind of pleasing thing, like wanting to please her in order to get her approval. And so I had to really look at myself and say, okay, what is it about that annoys me so much? Because it doesn't affect me directly. So why am I so upset about it? And I really had to look at, like, how do I do that? Or have I used to do that, but now I try not to do it anymore? How have I gotten through it? How have I moved through it, but now I see it in someone else and it annoys me? So kind of looking at, my ways that maybe I've done that in the past, or, parts of myself. So sometimes when we reject others, it's because we've projected onto them aspects of ourselves that we haven't particularly accepted in ourselves. So equanimity is starting to have an equal view of all beings. So another aspect of that we do when we are rejecting people is that we tend to sort of put them in categories. So we have the people that we love who take care of us and make us happy, and we have the people who we don't like, who do things that make us angry, and then we have everybody else who doesn't do anything to us, that we're indifferent to. So we've got these friends, enemies, and strangers. Okay. And so starting to see that actually when we make those decisions about people and then we treat them based on those labels, that we're actually doing it from a very ego or self-centered kind of way. And if we were to look at taking their point of view and looking at it from their perspective, we would actually see that every single one of them is the same in wanting to be happy and not wanting suffering. So just like me, they want to be comfortable, just like my friends, just like, everyone wants to be happy, wants to have good feelings, wants to have lasting happiness, wants to, have love in their lives, wants to have friends, wants to have food, all these things. And their problems are just as important to them as my problems are to me. So when they have bad things happen to them, they don't want them either. So starting to see, putting ourselves in other people's shoes and seeing that no matter how they treat me, they're actually equal in wanting to be happy and not wanting suffering. So equanimity is about starting to see them in this way. So we try to get rid of these labels of people as friend, enemy, or stranger. Yeah, let's see where I'm at. Phew. Okay. All right, I got off on that. Okay. All beings want to be happy, don't want suffering, and this ability to take another person's point of view, which starts to make all beings equally deserving of our love and equally deserving of our compassion. Okay. So we talked about a way of developing bodhicitta. We just reviewed the 7-point cause and effect, and there's another way that talks about exchanging self and others. Okay, so when we have a lot of negative feelings and are going through a very difficult time, we tend to do this contraction. We tend to sort of turn in on ourselves and become very protective and become very, looking out only for ourselves. And this is actually not a particularly good way to cope with our difficulties. Actually, a better way to cope with our difficulties is to start to expand, to open up our hearts. And I think some of us were really taught this idea that we have to compete, that this whole idea that it's survival of the fittest. This was then interpretation of Darwin's theory, that we have to be the best in order to somehow survive, that we have to compete with everybody and be better than everybody in order to survive. And actually they're finding that as a species, the species that actually survive, like the way that humans have taken over the world, is actually through cooperation. And this sense of a global economy that we have right now, and the fact that everything that we use is the product of many different countries and many different hands. It's really hard to find any, even the computers that we're on, some of the pieces were mined in Africa, and some of the ideas, came from the US, and some of the labor came from China, so, and other places. So that, and this is true of our clothing, it's true of our, our pens and pencils, and, the dishes. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's a coming together that we have done. And so actually solving our problems by opening makes a lot more sense. So equalizing self and others and developing this bodhicitta is starting to see that by opening, by starting to see the self as more connected to others, and then recognizing that our happiness is dependent on others as well as our own, we start to shift this view that we have to contract and be self-serving. That actually the more that we benefit others, the more that we see ourselves as connected to others and want to help them, the happier it actually makes us. And that self-centeredness and only focusing on ourselves is actually creates a lot of problems. It creates conflicts. It, makes us feel lonely. We get, worried and frustrated and scared. It builds all these walls between ourselves and others. And so pursuing happiness by benefiting others, it's very interesting. You have to check it out. Okay. So this way of developing bodhicitta, of exchanging self and others, is developing this gratitude for others, starting to see the self as, expanding, more connected. And then we do this equalizing self and others. So we have a tendency to think that our pain is more important than everybody else's pain. And that's usually because we feel it, right? When I stick a pin in my arm, I feel it. I know it hurts. But when I stick a pin in your arm, I don't feel it, right? Because it's over there. So what we're doing with this equalizing self and others is that we start to see that through our empathy, through our compassion, we can start to feel others' pain as much as we feel our own. So we start to bring and a self doesn't exist without others. Okay, and then we even go further and do this exchanging self and others, where we start to see, okay, we are different. Okay, it's not that we're all the same person, right? I'm not saying that, because we do exist as different people, and we couldn't be of benefit to others if we had this view that we didn't have any difference between ourselves and others. Okay, there is a difference. But now when we look at it, as, okay, I have all these others, there's like infinite other sentient beings, there's 8 billion people, and there's all these animals and insects, and then if we're talking about all the other realms, and here I am just one person. So where should I put my energy in making everybody happy? Should I be the most important thing? Or how yeah, this one I'm still working on. So what they say, this is what I've been taught, is, okay, what is $1 or euro or pound or whatever compared to a billion of them? Okay, it's very, very small, isn't it? So how much am I going to focus on my own happiness when there's so many other beings that I could be focusing on their happiness? Which, again, with self-compassion, I'm not going to totally ignore myself, because that wouldn't work. But where are my priorities? When we start making these judgments. Okay, so this exchanging self and others. And then we talked about this in the last class, how self-centeredness actually creates more problems for ourselves. We end up harming others. We're easily offended because we're only worried about how others are taking care of us, and then when they don't, we get upset. It creates fear, anxiety about holding on to what we have. It's the root of dissatisfaction, in the sense that when I'm only thinking about me, my wants are endless. I mean, I become this pit of oh, I need this, and then I need this, and then I need this, and I have to have this. Whereas when we're focusing on others, we get a lot more satisfaction from that. It creates conflicts with others, and it blocks our spiritual progress, because spiritual progress, especially in Buddhism, is about developing love and compassion. It's true in any other religion. Developing love and compassion is a big part of it, but also reflecting on the way we actually exist. Because if we are only focused on ourselves and see ourselves as separate, that's not how reality actually is, and that blocks us seeing the true connection, the interdependence of all things. And then how cherishing others actually makes us happy. We make other people happy, we feel happy, we have a meaningful life, we can be happy anywhere, we have healthy relationships, harmony increases, and we create positive karma. So then just to review Tonglen, this, I'm not going to explain it because I want to give us some time for questions, but this is Felipe is going to take you through this meditation. So this is a meditation that we can do where we start to learn to become willing to take on the suffering of others, to remove their suffering, even if it's difficult for ourselves. And then that gets rid of our self-centeredness, and then we send out love. Whatever people need, whatever will support them, you know, warm feelings, or food or support or medicine or whatever they need. And this is a meditation that we can do where we can start to interact with others instead of in this contracting level, but on a connection kind of level of giving love and taking on suffering. Okay, so let's do some questions.
Okay, there's a question from somebody that wants me to read it out. It says, if I experience strong emotions, how can I make myself be calm? How can I control these strong emotions the second that they arise? Sadness can feel uncontrollable.
Yeah, so Mingyur Rinpoche is really good with this one, because when he was a child, and he's an amazing meditator now, but when he was a child, he had panic attacks. And so his father, who was an incredibly advanced spiritual being, said he had to make friends with his panic. And really, he didn't want to make friends with it. He wanted it to go away. That was his reaction to it. And so he kind of had to fake it for a while, where he would say, okay, bring it on, right? Let the panic come, let the difficult emotion come, and then learn to just be with it, to just watch it, to explore it, to examine it. And what we find is the more that we're willing to sit with it with mindfulness, then we will see its impermanence. We will see it moving through us. Okay. So we do this, sometimes if we can't sit still to do mindfulness, we may have to do some physical activity. Oh, do I have it in my notes? Is it in here? Let me see. Hold on just a second. No, I don't have it. Sorry. Okay. So Mingyur Rinpoche had these four steps for dealing with really difficult emotions. And I know that one of them was you can do something physical. If you can't sit still and be mindful with the emotion, you can definitely do something physical and walk it off. And that's fine. And then, or take a nap, or, take a break of some kind. And then when it's less intense, you can come and sit with it and examine it. And like I talked about at the beginning of it, when we were talking about mindfulness, being present with the difficult emotion, to where we can breathe, you know, help ourselves calm down and see that actually the emotion is not our minds, that actually our minds have always, they have awareness, okay? They always have consciousness. And this aspect of our mind that is always present is calm, is peaceful, is still. And it's a matter of focusing on that and finding that awareness at the same time as these difficult emotions are arising. Because you wouldn't even know that you were having difficult emotions if your awareness wasn't also present at the same time. It would be impossible. You wouldn't, you know, you have to have consciousness of something in order for that thing to be present in you. So starting to see that you can separate those two, that you can be the watcher while the emotions are arising. And it's easier if you start with the physical sensations in the body. If you don't focus on what you're thinking, but focus on, where do I actually feel that? Do I feel it in my stomach? Do I feel it in my hands? Do I feel it in my heart? You know, do I feel it in my shoulders? Is it tension? You know, where am I feeling it? And what is that experience like? And then we can move into, what are some of the thoughts that are perpetuating, that are encouraging that feeling? So and there are always thoughts present with feelings. We may not necessarily be aware of them until we can settle down and see what they are. But some, you know, like and these statements that we have, so this comes from Western psychology. Albert Ellis talked about, and cognitive therapy talks a lot about, we make these broad statements about our reality. We say, you know, that it's a horrible situation. I should be able to do this. We use this exaggerated language in our minds, and then we believe it's true, you know? And so starting to see how we're exaggerating the situation to make it worse than it actually is, and then that feeds into these difficult feelings. So examining, what are we actually saying, and are those statements true, right? Is it a completely overwhelming situation, or are there positive aspects to it? Because there are always positive aspects. There are always positive and negative aspects to anything. And our minds are so amazing because they can make connections. They can find things. I mean, we need to use this tool of our mind to benefit us, not to be subject to its habitual ways of thinking that we have developed based on, you know, illogical reasoning. Okay, do you have another one, or is that it for today?
There's a very short one that asking if you could suggest a reference to learn more about Tonglen.
Tonglen. No, I don't have one off the top of my head. Maybe you do. Do you, Felipe?
Not particularly about Tonglen, not really. I mean,
Yeah.
it touches upon it on the book on how to meditate, but
yeah, that was my thought too. How to Meditate by Kathleen McDonald.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. And I'm thinking,
there's one person here. Alex says Pema Chodron is very good on Tonglen. Do you know which one particularly? Alan Wallace also.
Yeah, I have I know I listened to an teachings by Pema Chodron about the four immeasurables, and I'm sure Tonglen is in there.
Apparently she has a book called Tonglen, so that could be helpful.
There. Yeah, she's excellent.
Yeah. Should we move on to the meditation, or should we do one more?
No, well, do you have another one in there?
There is another one here, yeah.
Okay, let's do one more.
Okay, so I'm going to mute Linz. You can now ask your question.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, you can hear me but not see me. Thank you once again. I have a question about compassion and empathy. So thanks all the talkings, it's easier to make the difference between compassion and also be compassionate to yourself. But if I want to offer compassion, like I take over very easily emotions from other persons. So if they are sad and I want to comfort them, I become sad myself. So I read an article that there is a different reaction in our brains when we have empathy or compassion, that empathy drowns us empty and compassion not. But how can do you have any tips to, be compassionate without getting drained yourself?
Yes. One thing that we always remember, first of all, it's easier for us to be empathetic with someone else's pain than with our own. Okay. Because there's this separation right there. Okay. Right there. There, you know, the suffering is over there. But when we take it on and make it our own, of course, it's more difficult. Now, when we're seeing someone else suffering, we always can remember that it's temporary, that it is an impermanent thing. Okay, so this brings a hope that that the suffering will not last forever, that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, as we say. And then having a point of view that that they have the ability, they have their own Buddha potential, they have their basic goodness, they have the ability to deal with that suffering in the best way possible. They can learn from it, they can figure out ways to go beyond it. They can, you know, having this attitude that they already possess the ability to get free of it. Remembering that can really help us not become overwhelmed by their suffering, because we already have a point of view that sees them on the other side, you know, beyond their suffering. It's a hopefulness. It's a sense of hope that we, and when we have that attitude for them, we actually are more beneficial for them than if we get overwhelmed by their suffering. If we get overwhelmed and stuck in what they're feeling, then it's very hard for us to be of any kind of help, to actually be compassionate, which means wanting that suffering to be removed. That's the difference between empathy and compassion. Is empathy doesn't see that we want the suffering to be removed. And part of seeing that we want the suffering to be removed is having the view that that they can do it, that their suffering can be removed, and they can remove their suffering. So, you know, it's an attitude of respect, and it's an attitude, it's not of pity, you know, like I'm better than you and you're down here because you're suffering. It's an attitude of respect, like they have compassion. I mean, they have this Buddha nature that can work through their problems. And if I believe in them, they'll be better able to do it.
Thank you. The puzzle falls in pieces together. Thanks.
Good. You're welcome. So before we go to the meditation, Felipe, did you tell everybody? I didn't read the chat. We're going to have
the Q&A? Yes, I told them.
Yeah, we're going to have an extra hour after this class. So after this class ends, we'll take 5-minute break, and then we'll do another hour of question and answer about anything. So let's do some meditation now.
All right. So please, everyone, go to a comfortable position. Try to settle down and get your body into a position that is comfortable. Your back loosely straight. And take a moment to become grounded, stable. And allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. As we usually do, taking a couple of minutes to simply relax, let go of any tension, any agitation. Allowing body and mind to go back to their natural state. State of calmness, relaxation, stillness, and yet staying alert. And now letting go of observing the body in any way, letting go of physical sensations, we go into contemplation. So first, spend some time contemplating on the following points as a way to prepare for the meditation. So think about how all beings want to be happy. They have basic needs for food, shelter, being comfortable, feeling safe and loved. And they have things that they wish for, like friends, possessions, a satisfying job, and so forth. And all beings also wish to be free of every kind of pain and problem. So go into your heart and get in touch with these basic feelings that we share with everyone else. Recognize that everything you do in your life is motivated by the wish to be happy and to avoid problems. And the same is true for all other beings. And don't feel that there's anything wrong with feeling this way. We all deserve to be happy and free from pain. And then ask yourself, if we are all the same in wanting to be peaceful, happy and satisfied, and to not experience any unhappiness, pain or problems, then is it right for me to care only about my happiness and my problems? And check, what is the result of such a self-centered attitude? Does it bring you the happiness that you want? Does it prevent you from experiencing the problems you don't want? So try to recognize that this self-centeredness is counterproductive. And feel the wish to become less focused on yourself, more loving and caring towards others. It is possible to transform your mind in this way. And certainly one method that can help you do that is the practice of Tonglen. So we start by using one's problems for Tonglen. So begin by bringing your mind to a problem that is currently troubling you. You can start small, not focusing on a huge problem, but rather something manageable. It could be a physical problem, painful or uncomfortable feeling, a headache, or an illness. Or it could be something emotional, mental, such as sadness, hurt, or loneliness, or anxiety. Allow this problem to arise in your mind and feel how it bothers you, how it agitates you, how your mind wants to push it away. Then think and acknowledge, I am not the only person in the world experiencing a problem like this. There are so many others. Think of all the people who may be experiencing the same or a similar problem. Some of them even to a greater degree than yourself. And generate compassion for them, thinking, really feeling how wonderful it would be if all of those people could be free of their suffering. Knowing yourself firsthand that it's not nice to experience it. And giving rise to the mind of compassion in that way, you can then decide that you will accept or take on your own experience of this problem with the compassionate wish that by doing so, all those other people will be free from their suffering. So let go of your resistance, your fear, aversion towards the problem, And simply allow your mind to rest in it. And bearing the hardship with compassion in this way, we move on to doing Tonglen for another person's problems. So imagine that in front of you, you have people who you know and love. Perhaps your family members, a group of friends. And you know that these people, one way or another, are also suffering. Put yourself in their situation and try to really feel the suffering they are experiencing, how they wish to be free of it. And once again, thinking how wonderful it would be if they could be free from this suffering and problem. Generate the courage to take their suffering upon yourself. And visualizing your delusions such as self-centeredness, anger and attachment and jealousy in the form of a solid dark rock, a hard shell covering your good heart. And visualize your loved ones suffering in the form of dark smoke floating out of their body. Breathing in with compassion, imagine taking this dark smoke of suffering into yourself, and it goes into this area of the heart where it absorbs into this hard shell, this rock of self-centeredness, and it destroys it. Both the rock and the suffering, your own and that of the other people, become utterly non-existent. So try to feel a sense of joy that these people, these loved ones, are now free from their suffering and all their problems. And breathing out with loving kindness, now that the dark shell that was covering your heart is destroyed, it reveals all the light within you. As you exhale, breathe out your happiness, positive qualities, and merit in the form of bright light. Imagine that it transforms into whatever will bring joy and peace of mind to these people. Material things, love, friendship, inner qualities. Imagine that all of their needs is fulfilled, that their minds are filled with peace, happiness, and all the qualities of the spiritual path. And let your mind rest in a feeling of joyfulness that you've been able to help your loved one in this way. And allowing your loved ones to dissolve. Now you can bring to mind people who are going through difficulties in this moment during this pandemic due to the disease that is currently affecting so many people. Open up your heart so that those people become actual persons in front of you. They're more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Those are human beings that are suffering. And giving rise to the mind of compassion, wishing from your heart, may you be free of all that suffering. Once again, go through the same process, breathing in with compassion, getting rid of the self-centeredness within you, breathing out with loving kindness, giving away happiness and joy. Visualizing that all these people become free of all the problems, all the disease, and then they gain all the happiness that they wish for and deserve. And then allow them also to dissolve. And finally, bring your mind to some people who you might consider difficult. Perhaps some world leaders or just people in general who are not acting the part during these difficult times. People who you think are not skillful in the way they behave or the things that they say. And yet we know for a fact they're people just like us, human beings, who want to be happy and free of suffering, and yet they encounter suffering in many ways. Allow your heart to open up to them. Let go of any resistance and simply accept. And breathing in with compassion once again, imagine you remove all their suffering. Breathing out with loving kindness, granting them the happiness that they wish for and deserve. Visualize as they transform into different people with more sensitive attitudes. It makes a difference to have a happy heart. And simply allow them to dissolve and let go. Just feel the joy. Moving on to the dedication. As usual, reading from Shantideva's dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by the sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be free. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. Peace.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Felipe.
Thank you,
And
Venerable.
yes, so if you'd like to do some more Q&A, please come back in 5 minutes and we'll start again. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. Either way, wide open, up to you.
All right, everyone. Whoever has questions, could you please go to the participants section of your screen where it says participants, and you'll find a button to raise your hand. So raise your hands and that'll keep it in order so that you can, there we go. Already a lot of people raising their hands. Thank you. Interrupt you. Are you recording? Yes, you're recording.
I just restarted it. I had it paused.
Okay, cool. All right, that was one. So now I'm gonna start with the hands raised. So we go to Shmuel. Let me unmute you first. There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
I will read my question from, I've written it down. So we can't become enlightened using only our own intellect and effort. We have to study the Buddha's teachings for that. Is that correct?
Yes.
So my actual question is twofold. First of all, in his previous lives, did Buddha Shakyamuni study the Buddhist teachings of a previous Buddha? And second, how was he able to finalize his enlightenment in the life known to us without doing so?
Okay. So yes, he did study with previous Buddhas. So there, in some of the scriptures, they talk about Buddha Dipankara, that was one Buddha that he studied with, and Buddha Kashyapa, I think, is the other one that he studied with. So he did. Now, there are two views. From the Mahayana point of view, the Shakyamuni Buddha, when he manifested on the earth as a human being, was already enlightened. And he simply showed us the way by looking as if he was going through all the steps in his life. Another view is that he figured it out himself. He had such, well, first of all, he had teachings in past lives. And then in this life, he he was able to ripen all those seeds and develop all those insights and figure it out himself in this life. There are actually other paths of become, well, that doesn't bring you to full enlightenment though. There's a Pratyekya Buddha that they call, which is also translated as solitary realizers. So there are some beings who are very advanced who may in certain lifetimes not take on a teacher and not interact with the teacher, but simply explore and examine on their own. So this is
And,
possible in some lifetimes, definitely.
and what will their attainment be of those beings that do not step under a
Yeah,
teacher?
I mean, they become arhats, which is just not nirvana. It's not full enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe I can't phrase it very well, but from the point of view that Buddha Shakyamuni was not enlightened and became enlightened in his lifetime that is known to us, so it's very hard to understand the relationship in terms of cause and effect of having as much good potential so as to be able to somehow manifest it by oneself. The process is very unclear to me.
Yeah. It's a lot of previous lives of developing all the causes and the positive potential to create to finally finish the rest of the path. It's not like, they talk about him having spent 3 countless eons, which is like 3 big bangs and big crunches. He spent that much time even before he became, and then we're talking what, 30 years. So this was like the very peak of the whole path that he was doing. So he had tons and tons of teachings and practicing that he did before he was born here, and here it was just a very small thing that he finished up. So that's
And
how I see it. Can I, Louis, let someone else ask
yeah,
a
sure.
question? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on to Samir. So Samir, you can now ask your question.
Hi, Venerable. It's good to have teachings from you. So my question is, like, according to Buddha, the nature of mind is like a clear blue sky. Like, we get clouds, but if you clear them, the nature of mind is clear blue. But according to the Freud, the unconscious mind is like a dark room, and where we have lot of suppressed hatred or desires. So I'm like kind of like, what is the real nature of mind? Like is it because of that people kind of are more get easily affected by hatred and less by love? So what do you think?
Yeah, so a Buddhist point of view would not agree with Freud in the sense of that we have an unconscious and we have all this dark material that is in our unconscious that is not available to us. They would agree that we do have levels of mind, and there are certain things that we are not aware of yet, but we can become more aware of them. And they are both positive and negative aspects, okay? So this idea of a clear blue sky is the awareness aspect of the mind. And I think Freud didn't have an awareness of that at all and didn't talk about that part at all. He only talked about all the content of the mind. And he was particularly focused on the negative content. I mean, yeah, many of the women that he was basing his studies on, it turned out to have been, very abused women. So, I mean, not necessarily healthy, happy, developed human beings necessarily.
And just one small question. So
Sure.
like on self, like like when we see self from the emptiness perspective. So when we have this self talk, or when they have this inner voice, so is it not self, or is it a hallucination, or what is it?
Yeah, so remember, we do have a self, okay? From just like there is a cup, conventionally there is a cup, and there has to be a cup that exists in order for the cup to be empty of inherent existence. So it's the same with the self. There is a self, it's just how the self exists that is not so true. So when we do self-talk, we are talking about this merely labeled thing, a label on a body and mind. We are talking about it and we're talking to it. And no, it isn't. It is a self in the sense that the mind is part of the self, okay? And our self-talk is our mind, it is our thoughts, and that is part of the self. But it's not something that is separate from the mind or separate from the body.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to Ines. You can now ask your question.
Hello, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Well, this one is a little bit tied with yesterday. So it is a very complex question because then there's more, but basically it would be what does the Buddhist tradition think about suicide, and what happens to a person that has died because of that cause?
So whenever I get this question, I don't want to be fundamentalist and say always in every situation it's, if we're talking about it from a karmic point of view, of course, the biggest factor within a karmic action is the intention. So when someone is killing themselves, what is their intention? Sometimes it's self-hatred. Sometimes it's, hopelessness, no escape, right? Sometimes they feel like if they kill themselves, then the pain will stop, but they don't necessarily consider what comes after, okay? So and sometimes it's because they feel that it's best for the family. It's like the best thing they could do would be to stop their lives right now, okay? But they may not be operating out of wisdom that it really is best for the family, right? So so their intention could be misguided, right? So it is still taking a human life. And so it is considered a negative action from a Buddhist point of view, the action of killing. But it is also influenced by the intention.
Right. If the intention was existentialist because this person was always thinking about what reality was and what would happen after death, and they didn't know, like, the karmic, I don't know what I'm even asking anymore. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the intention of this person, if it was quite a specific because they wanted peace, and if they wanted peace, that's what I'm asking, I suppose.
So then are you asking, would it be a negative act if the intention was because they wanted peace for themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, then that tends to be more of a selfish act, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So it wouldn't necessarily be a positive intention. And when we work with people who are considering suicide, one of the things we do is really ask them to consider how it will affect the people who love them. And oftentimes that will stop people from committing suicide. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bueno, hay otra gente. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Gracias.
Okay, so we move on to Lena. I'm going to mute you now. You can go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is considering the yesterday course. You were talking about developing the wish to free other beings from suffering. And my question is, so there are some people who are obviously suffering, and like some of them don't seem to like want to get out of the suffering or don't want to accept any help. Can we do anything except of being kind with those people? Because like even the Buddha said, no one can save ourselves but ourselves. We ourselves must walk the path.
Yes. So we can, with people that we care about and that we have like a karmic connection to, we can be a very positive influence in their life through our kindness, through our prayers, through our wishing them to be well. So we can actually have an effect that I wouldn't, say that all we can do is be kind, because actually being kind provides beyond just the immediate, also at a deeper level, it provides that, that nurturing that they need to find within themselves the ability to grow and become and move through their difficulties.
Okay. So you assume that like all the people that suffer don't want to suffer.
Yes, I
Because
assume that.
in my experience, like I met some people in my life where like I saw them suffering, I felt they are suffering, and they were talking about their suffering. But when it came to change something, it seemed like they actually feel not so bad about suffering, that they actually want to change something, that they kind of hide in this, as long as I am suffering, I'm not responsible for myself and for my life.
Yeah, sometimes people feel like they can't get out, that they can't change anything. And they feel like it's too difficult to change anything. And sometimes suffering, people are so used to it that actually freeing themselves of it is too scary, is more scary. And so
Yeah.
then they don't do it. Yeah.
Okay, that makes
And so,
sense.
so then that's what they think, it's making them happy by staying in this, what they know, what is familiar to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, now we move on to Vannen. There you go.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Thank you again so much for this class. I like to ask a precision about equanimity. Does it mean no emotional reaction or no reaction to the emotion?
I think the second one, no reaction to the emotion.
Okay.
Also,
so,
and
yeah.
well, also that the emotional reaction that you do have is not as strong.
Okay. So it means that the meditation can help to decrease the intensity of the emotion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so my second question is, does it work with people who suffer from bipolar disease?
So I think it can help, but it also depends on the severity of the symptoms within the bipolar, and that for someone who has, a really strong underlying physical predisposition to the mood swings, that they may need medication to help with the physical aspect of it, and then on top of that, doing the meditation will help them even out even more. And then hopefully the more they can work with their moods through meditation, the more they can decrease their dosage of medication and maybe eventually remove it. So it depends on the person. But I think it can be a huge support to that, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
Okay, now we move on to Kiki. Kiki, you can now ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for doing these classes with us. My question is whether meditation on a regular basis can also have an effect on the way we dream, to kind of end this constant chatter that you were talking about, that we have during the day.
So yes, meditation can make your dreams more vivid. And they talk about this dream yoga within Tibetan Buddhism has more to do with becoming aware that you are dreaming while you are dreaming. So something called lucid dreaming, where while you're in the dream, you wake up even though you're still asleep.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up within the dream. Now, the constant chatter that you were talking about, I don't think that decreasing that is the effect of your dreams. Okay, I think that if you wanted to learn to slow your mind and make your mind more peaceful, that happens through meditation. And then when you're dreaming, it probably would affect it there too. I think that would make sense. Yeah, that's what you're asking, right? So then do your dreams become more calm?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I haven't heard that. No one's ever taught me that. It does make sense, but it also makes sense that just like when you meditate, you become more aware of your mind. So then you would become more aware of your dreams, and then you would be better able to slow them down. Yeah. So it would seem to. It would seem to. Yeah. Good question.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Kiki. So we move on to John de Souza. I'll mute you now. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Venerable. I have a question about perception. And my question is that since everything, all reality around us is supposedly how we perceive it, and not there isn't really any fixedness to the reality. Then what would you think about my role as a teacher and a parent when I am supposed to explain certain truths or certain ideas or certain values to my children, to my students? And what about arguments in a relationship when there is a difference of opinion about which truth is more appropriate to be understood and which is less appropriate?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good questions. I don't think that when we talk about things not being fixed, that everything is relative, that we're saying that you can just label anything, that you can make anything up, and that is a reflection of how things are. Because when we talk about the mind participating in reality, there are also other causes and conditions that exist. So we can talk about something like, the development of planets, or the fact that that seeds become plants. So your role as a parent and a teacher, these things definitely have this basis, right, in cause and effect, and so it becomes more loose when we talk about our own internal, some concepts and ideas, and when we talk about things that are more soft, right, less hard, like we talk about the hard sciences and the soft sciences. When we start talking about values, well, then we use as a judgment not necessarily truth, but we start talking about things like what is most beneficial, you know, what is the kind thing to do. So we do start bringing in the idea of values, of generosity, of, you know, kindness, of honesty, of, you know, right livelihood, and we can teach those, and we can use those as a basis, because even though they're relative in many ways, we can agree as a society that they're the best way to function, right? There may not be any hard truth to them, but they function very well for us, you know, as a society. Now, arguments in a relationship, the best way is not to necessarily figure out who is right and who is wrong, but to learn to understand each person's point of view and why they think that this is the way things should be, and why do you think things should be this way, and what is it, sort of the underlying of what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve, and what, you know, what's your purpose here, you know. And if you both want to have, you know, a happy relationship and a harmonious relationship, then who is right doesn't really matter as much as how do we figure out how to respect each other's point of view. And sometimes we have to agree to disagree, and that actually makes for a lot, you know, a very diverse, interesting, you know, kind of relationship. Sometimes you agree on something, sometimes you don't, but if you respect each other's opinion, then there's harmony, there's interest, you can go back and forth. That's really kind of nice.
Thank you, Venerable. I've always wished to have an hour-long conversation with you. I hope
Oh,
it happens.
thank you. Very kind, very kind.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can come here someday.
Yes, I do plan to come there someday soon.
Good, good.
Okay, we can move on to Jasmine. Oh, you need to know. Jasmine Kramer.
Hello.
Hi.
You can hear me. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is, what would be a practical way to make difficult decisions, to be not a play ball of often contrary thoughts and feelings?
Okay, say that again. A practical way to do what?
To make difficult decisions.
Okay. To make difficult decisions. Okay. Well, I can tell you how I work with some of them. I mean, I tend to meditate on them in the sense of being present with the situation and contemplating it, of course. Now, I recently was exposed to this method of inquiry, which is really interesting, that talks about asking the same question over and over and over again. And each time the answer takes you a little deeper. So, so I was doing this recently because I'm making a decision about where to live or what to do, you know, in the next couple of years, and asking myself, should I do this? And then should I do this? The same question over and over again. And then different answers come up for it, you know, different reasonings that are involved to try to get as full of a picture as I can of the situation. The other thing that you can do is, like, if you have two choices, is that you can spend, you know, time, like 3 or 4 weeks or something, if you have it, imagining that you're going with one aspect of the decision. So you imagine actually deciding to do this thing, and then you sort of live with the decision for a while as if that's what you're going to do. And then you take on the other one and you make that decision and you live with that one as if you're actually going to take that road, and see how they feel, see, how you feel about them. If you really, and you have to kind of be in some ways a little bit, make it as real as possible for yourself so that you can get the experience of, if I really choose this, what will it be like, and will I have regrets, or will I be happy with the decision? Does this really feel, like from that inner wisdom kind of place, does this one feel like it's the best for me? When you live with it for a while, you get a better sense of sort of gut feeling, or inner wisdom kind of feeling. And then when you try the other one, and maybe it feels more right, maybe it feels worse, and you're like, no, this isn't really the way. But you have to really live them to try to explore it that way.
Okay, thank you a lot.
Sure.
All right, now I'll move on to Marco. You can now ask your question.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, my question is around dependent arising and selflessness. So assuming that our bodies, our minds, our consciousness and feelings are subject to causes and conditions all the time. So I'm thinking, how can we turn it around? Or what is this thing which is saying, so now I want to change the direction. I want to practice meditation. I want to practice a kind heart, etc. So how does this happen if there is no self, and which is saying, so now from today onwards, I will change my way of living?
Yeah. So there is an aspect of the mind that is aspiration, right? That is a wish. So there's an ability of the mind to have a wish, to have an intention, to have a will, to want to change. That is an aspect of the mind that doesn't necessarily need a self to be connected to it. Okay, like when we talk about this concrete self that then has to have an intention, or has to have a wish, or has to have, this desire to change, we're talking about the fact that the mind can function in this way, just like a city can function without a single director, right? We can have the taxi, service that works. We can have the hospitals that function. We can have the grocery stores that function without someone in the government saying, now open a grocery store over here, or now, become a taxi driver over here. These things in our mind can function in this way without there having to be a concrete self directing these things. We do label on top of that, right? On top of all these functions, on top of all these minds, we call this a self, but we can't really give any more reality to that label than it actually has. But the mind can still function. It can still have attention. Some meditations, like with Alan Wallace, we were talking about Alan Wallace, he will start meditators off starting to view our thoughts and our sensations, and start to view them, do this mindfulness, and recognize that the self doesn't have to be present in order for those things to be happening. And there really isn't anything in our experience that connects it to a self. We can have those experiences can be happening, and they may not be in any way, connected to a self. They're simply there for us, he calls it. He says they're like a movie playing for us, but it doesn't mean there has to be someone who is having them.
I think that I understand that there is an intention, also a functionality, right, of the mind, for example. but still there must be a cause also, right? A cause for the wish to meditate or to develop the mind, right? So, or it cannot be independent, right? Because everything is dependent arising, right?
Right. So some of the causes that come are like people teaching us, right? Somebody saying it would be really good for you to meditate. I mean, that would be a cause for us to then start meditating, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, so the mind is interdependent with our environment, with other beings. Sure. That's the whole, you know, the whole sense of our interconnectedness. And that's why Buddhas are so important. You know, they teach us, they show us the way, they bring the Dharma to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Sorry, I went off on that whole other thing, and it wasn't even your question.
Sorry, Venerable, I lost you for a bit. You were saying?
Oh, I was just saying that I went off on answering the wrong question. But anyway,
okay,
maybe
we'll
somebody learned from that. Yes, yes,
we'll
next
move on
one.
to Pranav. Pranav, you can now.
Thank you, Drolma and Felipe. Thanks for doing all this. My question is, I was wondering if Buddha nature in Mahayana tradition is the same as the unchanging reality, what they call Brahman in Vedanta, or like they'll be different concepts.
Yeah, I did not study much Hindu philosophy. So one of the main things that they say that was so revolutionary for the Buddha was this idea of an-atman, so not Atman. So now my understanding of Brahman is like the universal reality, which is this that all minds participate in this universal reality, and that Brahma is like the name of this unity of all creation and all minds. And I had one teacher who said that one of the differences is that if you were to take away all the minds and all the sense of creation, there would not be anything left from a Buddhist point of view. And my understanding of Brahman, and I don't know, see for sure, is that there is still sort of a consciousness or a unifying force or something like this that would still exist. And in Buddhism, we would say that that doesn't exist for Buddhists.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Pranav. So now we move to Satya. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. You can ask your question now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hold on a sec. Yeah. First, thanks for doing this. It's been great. I think it's been benefiting many people. I was wishing that it would continue after lockdown because I think it's been so great.
Good.
So throwing that in there. So my question was about compassion. Where you wanted to you were minding expanding on that, or like having compassion in action. And but then I'm happy to give that up for I think it was Ines Matilda's mom. I think she had a question. I felt like it was important enough to pass on the baton if the time is to be swapped.
No, I think we have enough time for both. So yeah. So you wanted me to expand on compassion?
Yeah, well, when you were mentioning about the right attitude to compassion, sometimes somebody was mentioning about when you want to help somebody and that sense of emptiness and having kind of the right approach, the right attitude in that, knowing what you can do, or and knowing what you cannot do, what is in your hand, what it is not, and how to liaise with that, how to know that, and as well how to set yourself internally to deal with those situations.
Yeah. So I know many times when I was working as in mental health and I was trying to help people, I really wouldn't necessarily know what was the best for them, how was the best way to remove their suffering. I had to try what I could do, and then recognize that there were times when I couldn't do anything, you know, and having to accept that I cannot always, you know, directly remove people's suffering. I can try when I have, you know, when they allow me to, and when I feel like I have some skillful means to be able to do it without creating more harm. And it, you know, it just comes from wisdom. I think you just have to develop your wisdom, and the more that you can know yourself and know how to remove your own suffering, the better you'll be able to help others. I feel like that, I think that's real key. Recognizing, you know, when we act in ways that create more harm for ourselves, then we can start to see how other people are doing that. And maybe then if they're open to it. Now that's another thing. That really, that's where skillful means comes in, because sometimes people aren't ready to hear it. They aren't ready to hear from us. And if we do try to tell them, it'll create more resistance in them and they won't actually do anything. So that's where role modeling becomes such an important tool for benefiting others, that we become the kind of, you know, we act in a way and we think in a way and we you know, in a way that makes our lives better, and then other people see that, and maybe they become more open to asking us and accepting our help, because they see that we're doing something right. So that becomes even more, I think, in many ways more powerful than and children learn this way all the time. It becomes more powerful than walking in and starting to give someone advice that they can't necessarily hear.
So what you're saying is leading by example, and it's funny that you mentioned that about mental health, because sometimes people, somebody I think was saying before, you kind of want to grasp to that suffering in a way as a sense of identity, and when you're trying to get that away from them, is almost like, oh no, you know, I just still want to be that because kind of that's what I'm used to be. And then it becomes a bit of a frustrating situation in that you can see the potential of like, oh, come on, you can let go. This is much better in there. And sometimes you have to say, well, if that's where you want to be, you just, then so be it. And I struggle sometimes with that sense of defeatedness, in the sense of not having maybe enough skills to be able to serve that person.
Yeah, I know. And that's why we've worked to become Buddhas.
Trying to.
Yeah, me too. But that would be the motivation, you know, like, this is what's going to get me to the cushion. This is what's going to get me to study. This is what's going to get me to do my practice, is because even if I go out there and I spend, you know, 16 hours a day trying to serve people directly, until I'm a Buddha, I can't be as, you know, I can't really help them, right? I can only be, you know, I can only be semi-effective. But the more that I can, you know, become awakened, the more I can actually be of benefit. Yeah.
Thanks for answering.
Sure. Yeah, glad you're here. Where are you, by the way?
Based in I'm Spanish, but I'm based in the UK.
In UK? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. I always like to hear that. And who was the other person who was going to ask a question?
No, we have 2 more questions, 2 more
Okay.
hands raised. Yeah, so we can
Okay.
do those 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we go with Maria.
Hi, thank you for this insightful session. My question is related to today's meditation. So, in a sense, when we meditate on the hungry getting food and the powerless getting power, aren't we, in a sense, just feeding into their attachments? I mean, if they're happy, if our happiness or happiness in general, isn't it just fulfillment of different attachments? Because that's not where we want to get. So,
Right. Well, I guess I have two ideas about that. My first idea is that may the hungry find food. We're talking about basic needs for that one. Like we want, and people have to have their basic needs taken care of if they're going to develop spiritually, right? It's very difficult to be bound, or to be hungry and suffering all the time and still develop ourselves spiritually. So in that prayer, we are asking for them to have what they need wherever they're at whatever level. So some people need food before they can get to spirituality. Okay. Now, feeding into their attachments, I don't think that the prayer is giving, sometimes, okay, let me think about this. The prayer isn't saying we want them to become more attached. Definitely, Shanti Deva would not say that. Maybe it's just our intention. Yeah. That when we pray that prayer, we're actually intending them to have what they need to be happy so that they can discover spirituality. We wouldn't wish suffering on them, right? Because they already have enough of that. We would wish them to learn from their suffering, which would be the more lasting happiness. Yeah, the prayer doesn't say, may they have Dharma, may they have, learn about, I'm not, I think it's in Santi Deva's dedication, but it's not there, probably in that particular section. But yeah, I mean, we would want that too for them, of course.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. I hope that helps. It's a good question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we move on now to Anya. You can now ask your question.
Venerable, I wanted to go back to yesterday's question, that was, how do we balance self-compassion with acts of serving others? And serving others understood in a very general, broad sense, as in that wish of benefiting, not necessarily helping, like we talked about, maybe some extreme cases of, working at an institution which helps people who are at a disadvantage. But in general, where do we draw the line between that self-compassion and that wish of benefiting others as much as we can?
Yeah.
Because we didn't answer that in these discussions, actually. It's kind of more and more questions, so.
Yeah, and it's not, I think it's a moving line, that balance between self and other. I think it's definitely moves depending on our capacity, right? Our ability. And that there are times when we don't need very much, right? When we can be serving others and practicing a lot to practicing our bodhicitta motivation, and then there are times when we're more vulnerable, we're more sick, we're more, you know, having more difficulties in our lives, and then we have to focus more on our own self-compassion. So I don't think it's a, you know, that there is a clear answer. I think it's a constant question of, you know, what do I need now, and do I have, you know, am I being more focusing on myself when really I could be focusing on others? Or am I focusing so much on others that I am, you know, creating more difficulties for myself, which will keep me from being able to focus on others in the future? So it's a moving line. I really do think that. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes it's like yesterday we discussed it also with my sister, who's also here in the teaching, and we were wondering also how to sometimes, because it depends on the point of view that we take. In, for example, me doing something that looks like benefiting me, benefiting myself, I'm also in a way removing the possibility of planting bad karmic seeds by that other being, by that other person as well. So can my wanting to, I don't know, kind of have that self-compassion be understood as also preventing that other person or helping them in a way to avoid planting a negative karmic seed?
Yes, definitely. Yes, like when we set boundaries for others, we know who could be you know, using us, or, you know, stepping over our boundaries. We actually are doing them a favor by teaching them, you know, showing them that this is not, it's not okay. Yeah, and it protects them from then doing harm to us, which would create a negative seed. Definitely. Yeah. And that's the part of compassion that is sometimes more difficult, because maybe they have some temporary anger and they don't like us so much, but actually we're benefiting them. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
There is one more hand raised. Oh no, one
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Let's do that one last one.
Yeah, last one.
Okay. So Yotam, you can now ask your question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you again for all the courses. I was a student of yours 3 years ago, so it's been a good journey. I was wondering if you have some tips of, you know, trying to live a spiritual path, a Buddhist path, in a not so, you know, I'm still young, I'm 24. Most of my friends, my girlfriend, aren't exactly Buddhist. They're more into, you know, partying, drinking, what have you. So I was wondering how I can, you know, not isolate myself, obviously, but still continue with my practice, not have it so, because it is difficult sometimes. I feel kind of separated or different.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think the biggest support to continuing a Buddhist practice is having some kind of connection to others who are practicing. So even if it's like, I mean, like now you're here, which is awesome. But also, you know, like regularly once a week or twice a month or something like that, where you just spend, and it's only an hour. So it's not like, you know, your friends, you can be away from your friends for an hour, you know, twice a month or something. And that really, I feel like grounds you. I feel like it keeps you continuing to touch base with that part of yourself. And yeah, and I think that's probably the most important thing, is that you're touching base with others who are also practicing. Yeah.
Right. And what about just feeling like as an example of like killing mosquitoes or flies and stuff like that, I haven't done that since I was into Shita. But all the people around me obviously weren't into Shita, and they're kind of, you know, just seeing a fly and squishing it, and I kind of feel bad. And I try tell them all the time, but then I feel like I'm preaching them kind of.
Yeah.
And it's that balance of where is it comfortable to be in.
Yeah. I know. I just, that's what I do, you know, it's like in, when I'm with my family, I will just automatically save the insects. You know, I don't even think about it anymore because I've been doing it for so long. And so, I mean, I don't like it when they kill insects, but the more that they see me doing it and not really caring what they think about it, I don't say anything. I just do it. And then they see me doing it and they think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I'm saying anything. It's because they see me doing it. And it
Yeah.
sort of like, you know, wakes them up, you know, and they like consider their own behavior as a result of it, because you're just presenting a different point of view. And it's hard because, yeah, there are other situations where I have a really hard time meditating when I'm around people who don't meditate, because then I think I'm being all high and mighty by meditating, you know. But at the same time, it encourages them. It's beneficial for them, you know. But it's a little hard because, yeah. But if you really care about them and want them to be happy, then you know you're willing to do a little bit of that, to be a little bit uncomfortable doing what you believe in, because you know it's what will make them happy as well if they think about it, if they think about their own behavior.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nice to see you again. Okay, so let's quickly dedicate all this work that you did, listening, contemplating, questioning, and may it become the cause for our continued spiritual development and to benefit all of those around us and further and further and further out into the world. Okay, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venerable.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.